They say that love is everything, that loving is what makes us human, that if you are good enough, generous enough, loyal to the end, the world will reward you. They say that if you love deeply, without measure, without question, everything around you will fall into place. Friends will respect you, family will listen to you, partners will value you. But what if that is the biggest lie ever told? What if in fact unconditional love is not a gesture of greatness, but an invitation to one's own silent demise? Machiavelli, the man who looked at the human soul without veils and wrote about power as if he were dissecting reality, would never trust this promise. He did not write to console, he wrote to awaken. His words have crossed centuries because they did not seek to please, but to warn. Because love, when left unchecked, becomes weakness. Not because loving is wrong, but because loving without limits is giving up one's own protection. It is leaving the gate unlocked in the middle of the night, hoping that no one dares to enter. But the world does not function based on hope. The world functions based on self-interest. Have you ever loved someone who disappointed you and yet stayed there? Explaining, justifying, waiting. Have you ever offered forgiveness before the request was made? Have you ever lowered your voice so as not to cause discomfort? Have you ever pretended not to be bothered by something serious just to maintain harmony? Then you have already felt the kind of pain that Machiavelli warned about. Not the pain of common rejection, but the silent pain of betraying yourself to keep the other person close. Because pure love, the kind that sets no limits, teaches the other person to feel entitled to hurt you and not be held responsible for it. You are there like an open wall, allowing each word to be a stone and each silence an omission. And when everything collapses, you ask yourself, where did I go wrong? The world is guided by interests. This is the truth that almost no one wants to hear, because it seems cold, but it is only lucid. People get closer because of affinity, yes, but also because of access, comfort, and necessity. What Machiavelli understood is that every relationship carries a power dynamic, even those that claim to be based on affection. And when you love someone too much, you become a comfort zone. You become the one who gives in, who understands, who waits. You become predictable, and the predictable is never feared. And what is not feared is not respected. The concessions you make today become obligations tomorrow. And when you try to reverse it, it is too late. They have already created the expectation that you will always be malleable. Machiavelli did not write for the good. He wrote for the effective, for those who wanted to survive without giving up. And he said, "The ruler who relies only on the love of his people will be destroyed at the first gust of wind." The same goes for you. If your emotional security depends on the affection of others, you are already in danger. Because as soon as that affection wavers, and it always wavers, you collapse with it. Love, when it becomes the central pillar of your identity, leaves you vulnerable to any tremor that comes from outside. Love itself is not the villain. The danger lies in what love does to your perception. When you truly love someone, you begin to give in where you shouldn't. You forgive what you should push aside. You give away information that should be confidential. You let your guard down. You believe that your loyalty will be enough to keep the other person by your side. But Machiavelli knew, loyalty without power is just vulnerability disguised as a disguise. And the truth is that, in the name of love, you become an accomplice to your own exposure. Loving someone deeply is not a mistake. The mistake is thinking that this love protects you by itself, that it prevents betrayal, lies, and selfishness. How many times have you found yourself saying, "But I would never do that to him," and use that as an argument to believe that the other person wouldn't do it to you either, as if your moral standard were a mirror. But Machiavelli didn't see mirrors in the human heart. He saw calculations, and he knew that even the closest person can turn against you if they realize that there is no risk in doing so. Because in the game of emotional power, what doesn't command respect will be used no matter how much you love. You love. And because you love, you open up. And because you open up, you expose yourself. And because you expose yourself, you lose control. This is not a moral weakness, it is a strategic failure. Kindness, when unconditional, becomes fertile ground for abuse. not because the other person plans to hurt you, but because, instinctively, they understand that you forgive easily, that you put up with it in silence, that you always come back, and what is always safe becomes an easy target. It becomes a resource. It becomes a bridge. It becomes a shield from others. Machiavelli saw the heart as a resource, something that should be used but never given away without calculation. He was not against feeling. He was against getting lost in one's own feelings. He did not say, "Don't love." He said, "Love with restraint, with discretion, with strategy." Because if love is total surrender, then it is also total exposure. And there is nothing more dangerous than becoming too transparent in a world where everyone plays games, even when they say they are not. What is revealed without filter will sooner or later be manipulated. Have you ever noticed how the people who hurt you the most are almost always the ones you forgive the most? Have you ever noticed how those who demand the most from you are precisely those who offer you the least balance? There is a reason for this. It is because you taught them, without realizing it, that your kindness is priceless, that your affection is undemanding, that your forgiveness comes before repentance. And Machiavelli, if he saw this, would say, "You are no good. You are predictable, and the predictable is manipulable. You have become easy code, an open manual, a map for those who seek emotional advantages without paying the price for it." And here's the hardest part. The more you try to be understood, the more power you give away. Because those who need to explain everything they feel are already on the defensive. They're already justifying their existence. And those who dominate the emotional game never justify themselves. They impose. They choose. They set the pace. They set the rules before offering their heart. Because love offered without rules is a contract signed without clauses. And a contract like that only protects one of the parties, never yours. You can love, yes, but your love must be lucid. May it know how to stop. May it have a roof over its head. May it not offer itself to someone who gives nothing. May it not insist where there is only consumption, because love without return becomes sacrifice. And sacrifice without recognition becomes servitude. And emotional servitude is a prison without bars, where the key was given to you by yourself the day you decided that the other person was worth more than your peace. Machiavelli said, "It is better to be feared than loved if one cannot be both." But what he did not say directly, and what we can understand today, is that true power lies in loving without disarming oneself, in feeling without losing oneself, in caring without forgetting. Love should not be the absence of strategy. Love should be an alliance, and no alliance is made without clear terms. So before you say, "I love you," ask yourself, does this love make me stronger or weaker? Does it connect me or consume me? Does it expand me or diminish me? And if you hesitate in your answer, it's because you're already giving in too much. And the love that demands your surrender was never love. It was bargaining. It was emotional domination packaged as affection. And while you called it affection, the other person called it reassurance. Are you ready to start loving without losing your bearings? Because the most dangerous part of affection is when it demands that you forget about yourself in order to keep the other person close. And Machiavelli would be watching, not with judgment, but with accuracy, because he knew what few have the courage to admit. The most wounded heart is not the one that was rejected. It is the one that loved without strategy. And maybe you're about to realize that the pain you carry today didn't come from a lack of love. It came from an excess of it, given to someone who was never afraid of losing you. In the next part, you will understand what happens when this excess turns into unrestricted access, when people not only stop respecting you, but start using your own kindness against you. And at that moment, the game changes. And if you don't change with it, you will be just another good soul, used as a tool in the wrong hands. You never realize the exact moment when someone stops respecting you. There is no siren. There is no alarm. Sometimes there is not even a word. There is a look that changes, a tone of voice that hardens, a request that stops being a request and becomes a demand. And it all starts where you least expect it, in your excessive affection, in your excessive access. It starts when, in the name of love, you give too much and demand too little. When you confuse presence with obligation and dedication with debt. Machiavelli did not write for the weak. He wrote for those who wanted to understand the invisible mechanisms of power. And he knew that where love enters without restraint, respect leaves without warning. Because when someone gets used to your surrender, they begin to believe that it is an obligation, that you owe, that you are there to serve, even when you are exhausted, even when you bleed in silence. What began as a donation becomes an expectation, and what was generosity becomes emotional submission, disguised as affection. How many times have you felt that your presence went from being welcomed to expected, that your messages were no longer read with interest but were ignored with disdain, that your help became routine and your absence a reason for attack? It is at this point that something is lost, and almost no one notices. What is lost is fear, the fear of losing you. And where there is no fear of loss, there is inattention. There is coldness, there is carelessness. Love, when misinterpreted, teaches the other person that you are inexhaustible. Machiavelli told us that the prince who allows himself to be loved without being feared will always be vulnerable to the whims of those around him. And this lesson applies to you too. Because the moment others realize that you love more than you protect yourself, they start to act as if they have rights over your patience, your presence, your peace. And when you finally react, you are the villain. When you impose a limit, you become the ungrateful one. When you say no, you become the selfish one. As if the simple act of preserving yourself were an offense. Imagine someone you have always helped, who you have helped in every crisis, who you have supported without asking for anything in return. At first, this person is grateful. Then they wait. Then they demand. And when you fail, or simply walk away, they feel betrayed. But who betrayed whom? You, who finally thought of yourself, or they, who fed off your constancy without reciprocating? How many relationships do you have where the imbalance was fueled by your own goodwill? How many times has what you called empathy turned into self-abandonment? Unlimited access is the beginning of the erosion of authority, and Machiavelli knew this. He argued that rulers should maintain a certain distance, not out of arrogance, but as a strategy. Because what is always available loses its symbolic value. It loses its mystery. It loses its impact. The same logic applies to your relationships. Mystery protects. Predictability exposes. And when you expose yourself too much, people stop seeing you as a presence and start treating you as an obligation. Maybe you've experienced this with a friend, that person who, at first, seemed grateful for your listening and attention, but over time, started calling you only when they needed to vent. They never asked how you were. They just let it out. One day you couldn't answer, you were tired, mentally exhausted. And he got angry. He said you had changed. He said you were distant. But he didn't realize that in fact you were drained. And not out of selfishness, but out of tiredness of carrying everything alone, or with someone in your family, that relative who only comes to you when they need something. But when you need them, they disappear. When you help, it's the bare minimum. When you refuse, it's an insult. The scales always tip in the same direction. And deep down, you feel like you can't back down. Because backing down means guilt. And guilt has always been the link that kept you trapped. It's subtle. It's almost invisible. But it happens all the time. You're in a group of friends and you realize that only you care. Only you adapt. Only you go after them. And when you don't, silence sets in. Demands set in. Disappearance sets in. Or in your relationship, you realize that your concessions have become the basis of your coexistence. That your partner no longer even thanks you for your sacrifices. That he expects, demands, but doesn't offer, doesn't reciprocate, doesn't acknowledge. Sweet words have become scarce and gestures of reciprocity have disappeared as if they had never existed. And then when you change your tone, when you demand something, when you back down, the reaction is aggressive. As if you are breaking a rule that was never verbalized but was always there. That you have no right to change. That you cannot deny. that you cannot fail. And Machiavelli would be right there with you saying, "You are not cruel. You have simply begun to protect what others take for granted. You have begun to break the cycle. You have begun to put a cost on your surrender." The point here is not to distance yourself from everyone. It is to teach that your presence has value, that your time is not infinite, that your emotional energy is not an inexhaustible natural resource, and that every relationship, no matter how intimate, must be nourished by exchange, by balance, by mutual respect. Because love, when it is not surrounded by limits, becomes an open field for the invasion of other people's desires. And when your soul becomes a territory of free access, even the well-intentioned become involuntary invaders. Have you ever felt like the more you do, the less you are valued? Have you ever felt like your silence was used as permission? That your calm was mistaken for weakness? That your empathy was transformed into obligation? This is the cycle of unrestricted access. And this is exactly what Machiavelli warned about. Those who get used to being at their best, without understanding the cost of doing so, will never be prepared for the moment when you need to retreat. Because in their minds, you are not someone who chooses, you are someone who gives in. And when you withdraw, their reaction reveals everything. The friend who says you've distanced yourself, the partner who accuses you of having changed, the family who demands your attention without asking if you're okay. Everyone starts acting as if they own your availability. But you never signed that contract, and if you did, it was without reading it. It was in the impulse of misunderstood love, in the desire to be accepted, to be loved at any cost. But there is a cost, and usually that cost is yourself. And the longer you put off the adjustment, the harder it becomes to impose new rules. Because the more someone gets used to privilege, the more they react with revolt when they are treated equally. Machiavelli would never let the value of a leader be defined by the expectations of his subjects. And you should not let your emotional value be defined by the expectations of those who only know how to receive. It is necessary to withdraw sometimes, not out of anger, but out of structure. It is necessary to be missed, not out of manipulation, but out of realignment. It is necessary to remind others that what is offered with love can also be taken away with lucidity. Absence is a pedagogical tool for those who have forgotten how to be grateful. And here's the twist. When you start to control your access, you don't lose love. You gain respect. When you set a limit, you don't become cold. You become a reference. When you stop explaining yourself, you don't become arrogant. You become strategic. And those who don't know how to deal with this never really saw you. Because those who only accept you when you're little never loved you. They just tolerated you while you were useful. You were not made to be a constant yes, nor an emotional outlet for others to relieve their needs. You were made to be whole. And being whole requires absence. It requires silence. It requires denying sometimes. And all of this is part of building your emotional authority. Because authority is not what you shout. It is what you impose in silence with measured presence and regulated access. Machiavelli knew that true power does not lie in controlling others. It lies in controlling your own worth, in recognizing when people are becoming accustomed to your kindness, in realizing when love has become currency, in having the courage to reformulate the structure of the bond before it consumes you, in exchanging the fear of disappointment for the respect of taking a stand. In the next part, you will learn the 5 hidden tests that reveal when someone is starting to use your own surrender against you, and understand why those who claim to love you the most are also the ones who test the limits of your patience the most. Because true abuse rarely comes with shouting. It comes with the silence of those who have learned to mold you without you realizing it. Prepare to see beyond the surface. Because where love becomes absolute certainty, the most difficult to detect abuse is born. And as Machiavelli would say, when respect is taken away in silence, it can only be regained with firmness. And firmness begins when you understand that love without restraint is the shortest road to your own annulment. There are signs that almost no one sees. Small gestures, strategic silences, overly soft words spoken at convenient moments. When someone starts to explore your heart, they don't come with violence, they come with logic, with calm, with the disguise of love. And when you finally realize it, you're already trapped in a cycle of one-sided loyalty, where affection has become a tool and your kindness has become currency. Machiavelli, when studying power, did not ignore emotional bonds. On the contrary, he understood them as part of the deeper game, that of invisible influence, where what seems like affection can be calculation, and what seems like closeness can be a strategy of emotional domination. When someone gets close, they are not always looking for connection. Sometimes they are looking for access. And that's why there are tests. Little tests. Unspoken, unconscious sometimes, but repetitive. And every time you give in to one of these tests without resistance, the other person learns. You learn that you can push, that you can ask for more, that you can cross the line without paying the price. There are 5 tests. 5 subtle patterns that reveal who is studying you, not to know you, but to manipulate you. Have you ever noticed how some people stop being thankful over time? At first, everything is gratitude. Then, everything becomes obligation. This is the first test, entitlement or emotional ownership. The person starts to act as if you are theirs, as if your help is guaranteed, as if your patience is infinite. And if one day you say no, they don't react with disappointment, they react with fury. Because in their mind, you didn't say no. You broke the invisible contract of always being available. How many times have you heard, "You've changed," just because you finally set a limit? How many times has someone interpreted your absence as abandonment, even after you've been there all along? The appropriation test is cruel because it disguises control as affection. And when you try to leave, the reaction is never neutral. It's demanding, it's angry, it's emotional blackmail, as if you were the ungrateful one. You, the selfish one, but you're not. You just dared to do what the other person thought would never happen. Put yourself first. And when that happens, the bond reveals its true nature. Was it love? Or was it dependence disguised as affection? Was it connection? Or was it one-way emotional comfort? The second test is guilt. Guilt is a reflex, as a tool. You say no, and the person doesn't argue. They play the victim. They say they're hurt, that you don't care anymore, that you've moved away, and then you start explaining yourself, justifying, giving in. That's how the test works. Guilt becomes a mirror, and in that mirror you don't see yourself clearly. You see the distorted image of what the other person projects onto you. And here's the kicker. What if the other person's pain isn't about you, but about the end of their control? What if the hurt is less about what you did and more about what you didn't allow? How many times have you backed out just so you wouldn't carry the weight of guilt that wasn't yours? Machiavelli taught that a ruler who reacts to the emotions of his subjects is always at a disadvantage. He acts on reflex, not reason. And in the emotional realm, the principle is the same. Those who cannot stand being seen as insensitive end up being shaped by the fear of appearing cold. But there is a difference between coldness and firmness. Coldness disconnects, firmness protects. The third test is loyalty without reciprocity. You are always there, always attentive, always present. And the other person comes when he wants, disappears when he doesn't need to, and appears again as if nothing had happened. And the worst part, he expects you to be the same, that your energy is intact, that your disposition still exists, as if loyalty were your obligation, as if you never tire, as if it were eternal. How many times have you sustained relationships alone? You send messages. You ask how the person is doing. You arrange meetings. You deal with crises. And when, for the first time, you walk away, you feel scared. You feel desperate, but not because of love, because of the fear of losing the benefit. Because suddenly the emotional security that you represented has disappeared, and you realize they don't miss you. They miss what you did for them. That's not love, that's emotional dependence. And dependence, when not regulated, becomes exploitation. You become an emotional base, a buffer, a resting place for the other, but never a resting place for you. And here's the kicker. Why are you afraid to let someone feel your absence? Who taught you that pulling away is cruel? That protecting yourself is hurtful? That setting a boundary is abandoning? Maybe it was someone who used these triggers to keep you exactly where they wanted you. Accessible. The fourth test is the just this once test. It comes in a small, almost innocent form. Can you do this for me just today? Can you make an exception? I swear this is the last time. And you give in. Because it seems small. Because you want to keep the peace because it's just this once, but it's not. It never is. Because by giving in once, you communicate. This boundary is flexible. And what is flexible sooner or later will be bent. And when it is bent, you will no longer know where the favor ends and the abuse begins. The just this once becomes a pattern, and the pattern becomes a rule, and the rule becomes a prison. Machiavelli warned that when you allow a breach of protocol without consequence, you change the protocol. People don't learn from what you say, they learn from what you allow. And if you allow too much, you teach them that your limit is not a line, it's a suggestion. Have you ever stopped to think about how many times you have accepted something that, if it had come from someone else, you would have immediately refused? How many times have you made exceptions that went against your own word, just so as not to lose the other person, just so as not to create friction, just to avoid a conflict that deep down needed to happen? The fifth test is the most sophisticated. It is the moral inversion. You take a stand, you speak firmly, you distance yourself, and the other person accuses you of being too harsh, cold, unfair, insensitive. He does not argue logically, he argues emotionally. He turns your limit into a mistake, your clarity into arrogance, your silence into punishment. And then you start to doubt yourself. You start to reconsider whether you really exaggerated, if perhaps you were too harsh. And that's when the emotional manipulation is complete. When you, who acted out of protection, start to apologize for having protected yourself. When you, who got tired of carrying the burden, apologize for having let go of the burden. The moral inversion test is dangerous because it doesn't attack you directly. It turns the game around. It places you as the aggressor and the other person as the victim. Machiavelli would say that at this point you have lost control of the narrative, and whoever loses the narrative loses the game. Because now everything you do will be reinterpreted through this new lens, that of someone who hurts, not someone who defends themselves. You have become the problem, even when you were the solution trying to survive. And if you keep giving in to these tests, what is left of you? What is left of your identity when all your boundaries have been shaped by the other person's reaction? When your peace depends on how much you can endure in silence. You can't change other people's behavior, but you can change what they learn from your behavior. You can teach them that love is not a license to overstep, that affection is not a right of possession, that kindness is not an obligation, that presence is a choice, not a contract. From now on, start observing, not what they say but what they repeat, what they do when you impose, what they complain about when you change. Because there, in that discomfort, lies the truth about the type of bond that was built. And sometimes that bond needs to be broken, not out of resentment, but out of self-respect. In the next part, you'll learn how to turn your boundaries into structure, how to respond to challenges without anger, but with authority, how to use silence as a tool, and how to finally reclaim your core value without having to shout about it. Most people believe that setting boundaries is an act of rupture, that saying no is pushing away, that protecting one's own space is an act of rejection. This belief, nurtured from an early age, has created generations that confuse firmness with coldness, silence with punishment, absence with abandonment. And the result is a world full of exhausted people who keep saying yes, just so they don't seem mean. Machiavelli would never accept this logic. He would not write advice for you to be loved, but for you to be respected. Because love without respect is shaky ground. And respect, unlike love, requires clarity. It requires rules. It requires limits that do not shake with every emotional storm. A leader who backs down at the first sign of pressure does not govern. And an individual who backs down whenever the other person gets upset is not seen as strong. He is seen as manipulable. The truth is that you don't need to be accepted by everyone. You need to be clear with everyone. The world is more balanced when each person knows their position, their limits, and how far they can go without going beyond the other. This applies to intimate family and professional relationships. Respect comes from knowing your limits, from understanding that you don't adapt to someone else's mood, but to your own conscience. Have you ever noticed that the most respected people are those who speak little but stand firm, who don't raise their voices but never give in to emotional blackmail? There's a reason for this. They don't need to prove anything. Their presence communicates. And that's what you need to start building. A presence that speaks for itself, that doesn't need to justify limits because it consistently practices them. Now imagine two people. One is always saying yes, but with a tired expression. Always available, always kind, but clearly exhausted. The other is not always accessible, does not respond immediately. But when she speaks, she is listened to. When she acts, she is taken seriously. Who has more power? Who is more admired? It is not the one who gives of himself without stopping. It is the one who asserts himself with balance. Machiavelli understood this strategically. He knew that emotional predictability is one of the greatest risks for any leader. And in the emotional realm, this is even more dangerous. When your reactions can be anticipated, your decisions become manipulated. When everyone knows that all it takes is a little drama for you to give in, drama becomes routine. When everyone knows that all it takes is a little silence for you to come back, silence becomes a weapon. Have you ever stopped to count how many times you backed down? Not because you wanted to, but because you were afraid of what the other person would say. How many times have you ignored the discomfort inside you just to maintain a semblance of peace? How many times have you apologized when you haven't done anything wrong? That's not empathy. That's self-abandonment. And self-abandonment disguised as empathy is the most silent of emotional suicides. A study conducted by Harvard University found that people with clear and consistent boundaries tend to maintain longer-lasting and healthier relationships, not because they avoid conflict, but because they teach others where affection ends and dignity begins. This is strategic emotional intelligence, and this is what we need to learn to cultivate. Let's be blunt. You can't be respected if you're always explaining yourself. You can't be taken seriously if you change your rules depending on who's in front of you. Machiavelli said that a leader must be consistent in his decisions, even if they're unpopular, because consistency over time builds trust. People test what's flexible, but they bow to what's stable. Think about all the times you said okay when you weren't, how many conversations you swallowed, how many forced silences. Each of these concessions built the image that others have of you, someone who gives in. And if you don't change, this image solidifies. And then, even if you scream later, it won't do any good. Because no one fears a roar coming from someone who has always meowed. You need to learn to say no naturally, to refuse without making excuses, to walk away without warning, to not respond on the same day, to not always be available, not out of pride, but as a strategy. Because if you are always accessible, you are never valuable. What is always within reach loses its shine. What is rare is respected. What has criteria is desired. How many times have you gotten into an argument just to explain yourself? And the more you explained, the less you were understood. Because in some cases, the explanation is just another opening for the other person to question you more. It is an invitation to negotiate your own value. Machiavelli would say that explaining too much is wasting time trying to convince someone who has already decided not to respect you. From now on, the practice must be different. Short answers, long silences, selective presence. The world does not need to know everything you feel. Those who need to know can already tell by your attitude. Too many words weaken your position. Strength lies in calm, in the absence of reactivity, in mastering your own time. There is a story that helps illustrate this. An African tribal leader, known for being wise and feared, rarely spoke in assemblies. When asked about his silence, he replied, "I speak only when what I have to say is more valuable than what silence can teach." This logic applies to your boundaries. Don't impose with speech. Impose with action, with firmness, with repetition. One of the biggest traps is the belief that you need to justify every change, that you need to explain every departure, that you need to give satisfaction every time you protect yourself. This is emotional infantilization. It is being treated like a child by those who should see you as an equal. Growth requires discomfort. It requires being misunderstood sometimes. It requires being firm even when others cry. You are not here to please. You are here to live with dignity, to love with criteria, to be with those who are also there, to give of yourself where there is reciprocity. And this is only possible when you are not afraid of being frowned upon, when you accept that some people prefer the version of you that annuls yourself, that surrenders, that gives in, and that these people do not deserve you. Machiavelli, if he were alive today, wouldn't tell you to be cruel. He would tell you to be strategic, to observe, to retreat when necessary, to advance only where there is solid ground. And most importantly, to stop trying to save relationships that only survive because you are still afraid of losing yourself in them. A recent study by the University of Toronto showed that people who stick to their decisions even in the face of negative reactions have stronger self-esteem and suffer less from social anxiety. This is no coincidence. It is a consequence. Inner clarity produces external security. Those who know what they can tolerate are not shaken by rejection. Now look at your life and ask, what am I tolerating in the name of peace? Who am I keeping out of fear of emptiness? What versions of myself have I destroyed just so as not to upset? What am I silently accepting so as not to seem insensitive? The answer to all these questions is your next step, and perhaps the most difficult one. Because building boundaries is not about building walls. It is about building doors with selective keys. It is about allowing access consciously. It is about knowing that not all love is worth staying. Not all relationships are worth saving. Not all conflicts should be avoided. You will begin to notice the difference between those who respect your silence and those who demand your presence. Between those who ask if you are okay and those who only complain about your absence. Between those who listen to you even when you don't speak, and those who only value your voice when it serves their desires. And in that moment, everything changes. In the next part, you will learn how to maintain these new limits even when everything around you is asking you to return to the old pattern. You will understand why silence, when used well, is worth more than any argument, and how constancy is what transforms a limit into identity. Because in the end, as Machiavelli would say, power is not in being loved, it is in being impossible to manipulate. There comes a point in everyone's journey when it's no longer about learning to say no. It's about learning to keep saying no even when all your old habits are screaming at you to say yes. Maintaining boundaries isn't just a decision, it's a practice, an emotional discipline that will be tested in the most subtle of situations. Not when you're angry, but when you feel sorry, when you miss someone, when you feel like maybe, just maybe, giving in one more time won't hurt. But it will. Machiavelli understood like no one else the importance of constancy. He knew that it is not enough to appear firm in a moment of conflict. You must appear unshakable, even in moments of peace. Because the real test does not come when you impose a limit. It comes when someone tries to reopen what you have already closed. And you, afraid of appearing cold, hesitate. You open it again, you start over, you regress, and the cycle begins again. How many times have you backed out of something just because someone seemed remorseful? How many times have you reopened a door that should have remained locked just because the other person said the right words? And most importantly, how many of those times have resulted in real change? Most likely, very few, because most people don't really change. They change their tactics. The pain of maintaining a limit is real. But the pain of reliving the same disappointment because you gave in is deeper. Machiavelli would say that those who give in out of pity will always be slaves to the appearance of other people's regret. And that is not a strategy. That is vulnerability without protection. A weakness of those who still believe that others will respect what you yourself do not support. And this is where the art of observation comes in. Not what is said, but what is done. Consistency only exists when you transform your perception into a criterion, when you stop reacting to speech and start measuring actions, when you learn to differentiate real change from emotional manipulation. Because if change only appears when you walk away, then it is not change. It is a strategy for reconquest. You need to internalize one truth. Just because someone misses you doesn't mean they deserve to come back. Missing someone is easy. What's hard is changing the patterns that cause the separation. And generally, those who miss you want the comfort of your presence more than the responsibility of treating you the way you deserve. Machiavelli would say that there is more power in keeping a door closed than in opening it on impulse. Let's imagine a situation. You distance yourself from someone who has hurt you. The person disappears for a while. Then they come back with loving messages, memories, promises. Everything seems different, but you feel that something is out of place. And it is, because the focus is on reconnecting, not on changing behavior. This person doesn't want to see you again. They want to rediscover the benefits that your presence offered. And here is the break. You are not a benefit. You are a being with limits, with choices, with memories that should not be ignored for the convenience of others. Your absence should cost a high price, not for revenge, but for justice. Because when absence is light, presence becomes routine, and routine becomes disrespect. How many times have you seen someone change dramatically for a few days, only to revert back to their old pattern as soon as they sensed you were back? That happens because you didn't put a real price on returning, because you accepted symbolic gestures as proof of transformation. But transformation is not a gesture. It's consistency, it's repetition, it's time. Machiavelli would say, the true test of change is the stability of behavior in the absence of immediate benefit. And this goes for everything: friendships, relationships, family. If someone only treats you well when they feel like they're going to lose you, then that person doesn't respect you. They respect the loss. And that's not admiration, it's fear. And relationships based on the fear of loss have no future, because fear passes and the pattern returns. You need to cultivate a new attitude, one that doesn't negotiate respect, one that doesn't act out of need, one that doesn't undo what you know because of what you feel. This takes courage. It takes discomfort. It takes bearing the weight of silence and solitude. But it's the only path to emotional autonomy. Machiavelli believed that a reputation for firmness was one of a leader's greatest protections. And you, even if you don't want to rule kingdoms, need to understand that you rule your life. And the way you are perceived determines how you will be treated. Firmness does not drive away the right people. It drives away those who were there for the wrong. You will begin to notice that your absence bothers them more than your presence pleases them. That your silence has more impact than your attempts to explain. That the simple fact that you do not give in generates more respect than any pretty words. Because emotional authority is born the moment you stop trying to convince others to value you, and you start behaving like someone who already knows their own worth. There is a saying that goes, what you allow, you teach. And what you reinforce, you repeat. This phrase sums up the principle of emotional constancy. You don't need to shout or justify yourself. You just need to stay the same. And most importantly, maintain absence as a response when presence has been disrespected. Now think about all the times someone has hurt you, apologized, and you have forgiven them without criteria. How many times has the apology become a license to repeat the mistake? How many times have you believed that the other person was incapable of hurting you again just because they seemed sincere? The truth is that it's not about sincerity. It's about capacity. And if the person is capable of hurting you, they will do it again. Unless they understand that next time, they will no longer have access. Machiavelli would say that punishment should be exemplary, not cruel, but symbolic. Not as revenge, but as a message. Because if the other person does not understand the gravity of what they did, it is because you did not communicate the impact clearly. And sometimes silence is the only language left when all others have been trivialized. You don't have to stop loving. You have to learn to love with criteria, to surrender with vigilance, to remain not by impulse but by conviction. This does not take away the beauty of the feeling. It only takes away the naivety. And naivety is what makes love most vulnerable to exploitation. We live in an era where everyone talks about love, but almost no one talks about emotional responsibility, where forgiveness has become the rule and repentance has become a performance, where saying "I've changed" is more important than proving it with consistent actions. And if you want to keep your peace, you need to break free from this logic. When someone comes back into your life, The question shouldn't be, does she still love me? The question should be, is she willing to treat me the way I deserve, even when it's not convenient for her? That's the real metric. Because love, when it doesn't go hand in hand with respect, becomes a prison disguised as paradise. And finally, remember what Machiavelli would say if he were by your side. Those who do not know how to lose gracefully will never know how to win wisely. You do not need to win every argument. You only need to win yourself the moment you are about to give in out of need. And that, perhaps, is the greatest victory of all. In the next part, you'll learn how to turn your emotional consistency into a reputation. How to get people to treat you with the respect you demand. Not because you demand it, but because you show it. You'll learn why quiet determination is more powerful than any shout, and how repeating solid behavior builds something rarer than love, unshakable trust. You've come this far, and that says a lot about you. Not everyone looks at a mirror so directly, so raw. Most people look away. They run away. They minimize. They laugh as if nothing had hurt. But you stayed. And that's no small thing, because to apply everything we've said so far, it takes more than understanding. It takes courage. Courage to accept that some of the pain you felt wasn't unfair. It was a sign. Courage to accept that perhaps in many relationships, you were too accessible. And courage, above all, to choose a new way of living, one that demands presence, attention, silence, and action. One that demands constant vigilance over one's own limits and a rare ability to rebuild oneself without losing one's essence. What I want to give you now is not just the conclusion of a series. It is the beginning of a real plan, a method, a code of conduct that transforms theory into practice. Because emotional power without structure turns into anger, strategy without application turns into arrogance, and wisdom without movement turns into vanity. Clarity only becomes transformation when it goes through repetition, consistency, and the will to stop being just conscious and become disciplined. So listen carefully, because from now on, everything depends on what you decide to do, not on what you feel. Emotion without action becomes stagnation, desire without movement becomes anguish, and self-knowledge without practice becomes a decorative luxury of the mind, but never a foundation of character. That is why each step you take needs to be more than an intention. It needs to be a position. First, you need to accept that you will be misunderstood, and that's okay. When you stop explaining yourself, justifying yourself, seeking emotional consensus, many people will say that you have distanced yourself, that you are different, that you have become cold. And you know what? They are not wrong. You are different, because the old you was malleable. You were predictable. You were the kind of person who sacrificed your peace to maintain the illusion of harmony. Now, you are whole, and whole things always bother those who need you in pieces. Understand, when you change your frequency, those who were used to the sound of your self-abandonment start to complain about the silence of your new strength. Second, choose 3 relationships that consume your energy the most. They can be family, friendships, or romantic relationships. Analyze these 3 with a surgical eye. What do you give? What do you receive? Is there reciprocity, or just demand disguised as affection? Use a simple criterion. Does this person respect my limits even when they don't understand them? If the answer is no, begin the process of redefining how you appear in this relationship. This doesn't mean cutting them off, but rather repositioning them. Give less access, less availability, more silence, not for revenge, for strategy. You need to understand that you owe nothing to anyone who profits from your exhaustion. Third, write down 3 phrases that you repeat when you are trying to justify something to someone. Phrases like, I just wanted to help, I didn't mean any harm, I'm sorry if I seemed rude. Keep these phrases in mind. Every time you feel like using them, stop, breathe, and replace them with presence, with boundaries, with pause. The words you need to say are not to relieve the other person. They are to support you. Don't explain your value. Show your absence. Show your coherence. Show that your silence carries more structure than any emotional justification that weakens you. Fourth, create a personal rule for each type of emotional test we discussed in Part 3. Example: if someone stops thanking me, I stop offering. If someone tries to blame me, I end the conversation with dignity. If someone shifts the blame, I don't fight back. I just walk away. The predictability of your boundaries turns respect into routine. And routine, when well designed, creates territory. You need to be territory. A place that cannot be stepped on with any step, that cannot be entered with any speech. Your emotional predictability needs to be confused with solidity, not with weakness. Fifth, establish a ritual of silence. Choose a day of the week to not respond to anyone immediately, to not justify yourself, to not give in to the urge to explain your distance. Use this day to observe your thoughts, your emotions, your impulses, because it is in silence that clarity resides. And whoever masters their own silence, masters their own destiny. Conscious silence is the space where discernment grows, where strategy takes shape, where you rediscover your center without the distractions of the world. Sixth, turn your pain into a manual. Take the 3 most painful episodes you've experienced in relationships, not to relive, but to review. What did you ignore? What did you allow? What did you expect? And what did it teach you? This exercise is uncomfortable, but essential, because when you organize pain, you take away its power to surprise you again. And more than that, you transform your scars into foundations, your past into methodology, your vulnerability into emotional precision. The manual of your pain is the primer of your freedom. Seventh and final step, accept that you will lose people. And this is part of the process. Some will walk away because they can no longer control you, others because they miss your old fragility, and some because they left when they realized that now you love yourself more than you need to be loved. This hurts, but it frees you. Because when you become faithful to your own peace, everything else becomes optional. What was once an obligation becomes a choice. What was once a dependency becomes a conscience. And what was once a sacrifice becomes a criterion. Machiavelli was not a cold man. He was a lucid man. He understood, before almost anyone else, that power is not about force. It is about structure. And structure starts from within. Now you have that structure. You have the tools. What is missing is not knowledge. It is habit. It is repetition. It is ritual. It is the discipline of choosing every day to move away from the version of yourself that would accept anything just to avoid being rejected. If you want to lead your own story, you must first control your reactions. You no longer need to prove that you are good. You no longer need to adapt to the narrative of those who only value you when you are losing. You no longer need to wait for someone to understand you before taking a stand. You just need to walk. And the path is here. The plan is laid out. The ideas have been placed before you like a sharp mirror. What you do with that reflection, that is what transforms you. Apply. Test. Fail with dignity. Come back to center. Reinforce your walls. And keep moving, because now you know. Being emotionally strategic is not about not feeling. It's about choosing what to do with what you feel. It's about using your heart as a compass, but not as a leash. It's about remembering that empathy without a filter becomes self-abandonment, that kindness without limits becomes submission, and that love without criteria becomes a prison with a pretty name. And if this content brought you clarity, if you felt that some part of your story was told here, I invite you to continue this journey with us. Subscribe to the channel Deep Psyche, like this video and comment below. You can do it anonymously. How these ideas impacted you, what you experienced, or what you are ready to change. Because your experience can be the mirror that someone needed. And because here, no one walks alone. Until next time.